YouTube, what is up? JP here. We got a surprise for you today. Today we're going to be working on and wiring in this beautiful Toyota Land Cruiser. We'll take you around, kind of show you what we're going to be doing. A good buddy of mine has had it painted. It was his father's before. Just an amazing vehicle. They've done a good job. So today we gotta fix a couple gauges for him. We're gonna go ahead and get his new wiper motors installed properly and wired. We're gonna end up tucking these wires nicely so they're not just laying across the floorboard. And then he also has a battery draw. So we got the JP rig here, full mobile shop. Let's get started. One of the complaints was these light bulbs had fallen back in, so I was able to go ahead and push the wires back through. So we got the ohm meter hooked up down here on the oil pressure switch. So take my other test lead here. We're going to test our signal wire. You can hear that, so I am getting a reading. So how much resistance are we getting? Quite a bit. So we definitely have a break in the wire somewhere. Might just be more advantageous to run the wire straight to this. So what I'm doing here is I found that the positive wire and the grounds shared between multiple points on the back of this cluster. However, they had one of the ground wires going directly to the S terminal, but then they also had the gauge wire going to the S terminal as well, and so it was just permanently grounding both the oil pressure sensor and the coolant temp sensor. So what I did is I put dedicated grounds where they're supposed to go on the ground port, and then right here I'm actually running brand new wires to both gauges, because even after I fixed the ground issue I had high resistance. So what I'm doing here is making sure that outside the firewall I could go ahead and clip these wires, run new wires through the firewall, and just have dedicated coolant and oil pressure sensor wires. So there you guys go on that. All the gauges are properly working now. So now I'm working on getting the wires tucked nicely. And I'm using a woven wrap for this. It's very flexible. And then what I did is, out of all places, I found a wire loom that was at Ace Hardware, and it's got 3M sticky tape on one side, and then what I ended up doing is using zip ties that have a drill port to hold it exactly where I want it along this shifter here. So this is just getting the wires cleaned up to make it look nice and professional. All right, we got the wires neatly tucked. So here I am starting to figure out how to wire in these aftermarket wiper motors. For reference, they're a 3-wire motor, independent of one another, but we wanted them to be on obviously the same switch. So they have a S terminal, a positive, and a negative. So this was just me kind of figuring out how I was going to wire them. They had this nice loom already done, so I decided to go ahead and splice into that loom and reuse it. All right, so the next thing up is going to be wiring in our switch for the wiper motors. I got the old switch out. Old switch just unscrews. Unscrew the tip and then unscrew the housing. So we're going to have to go in there, redo some of the wires. So the way I ended up having to wire these motors to be sequential, because they only have one S terminal, which is the signal terminal from the switch, We were only able to do one speed on these particular motors. The switch that the customer supplied had a low speed, high speed, so we just went ahead and wired the motors in for high speed constant. Something to note here, I had to do an ignition fused power straight to the motors, and then also a ground straight to the motors. And then even though the switch said it was supposed to be connected to battery voltage, the motors themselves, their S terminal needs to be a ground signal as well on a switch port. So on the back of the new, I think it's a Speedway or Speed Motors switch, where the battery terminal was, I ended up just making that a ground, and then the other wire that is already split at the motors themselves is a ground up to the motors through the switch. So they ended up working. Unfortunately, my video camera, I didn't bring enough batteries, and so I'm not able to show you guys the motors working, but we were able to get the motors working once we got that all figured out. Here I'm just kind of testing the circuit. It took me a minute to figure out why the motors weren't turning on, because obviously the switch said positive voltage, but it ended up being negative voltage. I didn't have the actual manual for these motors. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.